Alright, sorry about that. The computer decided to shut down in the middle of the first video. So I'm going to continue on. As we were saying, the interior angle of that pentagon is 540 degrees. So if we add up all of the angles, 132, 90, 90, 88, plus angle E, and set that equal to the total of 540 degrees. All of those add up to be 400. And if you subtract off 400, angle E is equal to 140 degrees. And because of these corresponding parts of that congruent pentagon, if angle E is congruent to angle B, and angle E is 140, the measure of angle B must also be equal to 140 degrees. Now the next example is just like with the triangles that we had up here. It says WYS and MKV are congruent to each other, just like I drew. Measure of angle Y is 35. What is the measure of angle K? Well, Y and K are congruent, or corresponding to each other, so therefore they must be congruent to each other, so that also should be 35. So the measure of angle K is equal to 35 degrees because Y is congruent to K. Alright, a few more things to talk about. And now we're going to start talking about these corresponding parts of a congruent triangle. In order to show that two triangles are congruent, they have to have three pairs of congruent corresponding sides and three pairs of congruent corresponding angles. So they need three sides and three angles. So let's look at this figure. We need to figure out, are these two triangles the same? So we have the first triangle here, and we have the other triangle here. Are they congruent to each other? Let's look at the sides. How many sides are congruent to each other in both these triangles? Well, you'll see that this one is 4 and this side is 4. That's one congruent side. If this side's 3, then this side's 3. That's two congruent sides. And then this mark here and this mark here means that those sides are congruent. So we do have three sides that are congruent. But let's look at the angles. We have a right angle and a right angle, then we have another marked angle and then this marked angle that are congruent. So really we only have two angles. So what we need to figure out is this angle here and this angle here. Are they congruent to each other? So are these angles congruent? And hopefully you're all yelling, yes, 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 they are. Yes, they are. Why are these angles congruent? And hopefully you're all yelling out, because they're vertical. And all vertical angles are congruent to each other. So now we can say this angle, this angle, this angle, and this angle, and then these two angles are congruent to each other. So therefore, we don't have two angles, but we have three angles. So therefore, yes, these triangles are congruent because 3 sides are congruent and 3 angles are congruent. So the next thing on our list to do is talking about Theorem 4.1. It says, if 2 angles of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles of another, then the third angles are also congruent to each other. Let's put some numbers here. If angle B is 80 and angle A is 40, angle B is congruent to angle E, we can tell by the congruency marks, so this is 80 and this is 40. So I have 2 different triangles with the same measurement of 2 angles. What is going to be the angle C and angle F? Well, we do 180 must be equal to 80 plus 40 plus some number, right? That extra one. And if we were to subtract that off, we get 60 equal to x. And if we do that obviously again, you're going to find that the other one is also 60 degrees. So they are equal to each other. So really you don't need to know that 3 angles are congruent. You only need to know that 2 angles are congruent because the third one will automatically be congruent to each other. Alright, last part. Justifying why each statement is true. So let's use our information that we know from a couple units in the past and all the information we know about what we learned today to figure out how these 2 triangles are congruent to each other. Well, it says PQ is congruent to PS and QR is congruent to SR. Is that true? Yeah. How do we know? We look at the figure and they're marked. PQ and PS had the 1 line, these 2 have 2 lines, so that information is given. They use those congruency marks to show that. What about PR is congruent to PR? This line is congruent to that line segment. Well, obviously they're the same side because of the same length. This is the reflexive property. Then it says angle Q is congruent to angle S. Well, they're marked that way. And QPR and SPR are also marked with the 2 lines, saying that they're congruent to each other. So that is also given. That's the congruency marks. Again. So if we know that 2 angles are congruent to each other, we should know that this third angle down here, which I'll mark with 3 lines, is going to be congruent to that one there, which I'll also mark with 3 lines. Why is that? Because of Theorem 4.1. If 2 angles of a triangle are congruent to another 2 angles of another triangle, then the third angle are also congruent to each other. So now if we have 3 sides congruent, 3 angles congruent within each of these figures, we can say that the triangle PQR, which is this one here, is going to be congruent to this triangle here, PSR, by the definition of congruent triangles, which is really that first statement at the top of this page. That 2 triangles are congruent when they have 3 pairs of congruent corresponding sides and 3 pairs of congruent corresponding angles. Hey, I hope you guys had fun with that. And again, I hope to see you guys soon. You can go back and rewatch this again, as I said, if you would like to, if you need to get caught up, or if you missed something, please do so. And your assignment will be coming to you. Please work together. Don't just sit here and socialize. Do the best that you can with the assignment, and we will go over it when I get back. Hope to see you guys soon. Take care and be good.